Did it again. See, as soon as Bird of Prey comes into the chat, the mute comes on. That's what happened. The mute was off until Bird of Prey 5 came into the chat. Dang it, Bird. It's all your fault. That's my official story, and I'm sticking to it. Dang it. All right, so it's okay that it was muted anyway, because I started to call myself Anti-Tricker, and of course I'm not on the Anti-Tricker channel. So thank you all for joining this wonderful Sunday morning. So Carlo was first in the chat. Jeff says good morning. Mrs. Anti-Tricker is here, and she's always first in my heart, of course. Chris Cook is in the house. Luke says bonjour, believers and unbelievers. By the way, Luke, fun fact. Last night, me and Mrs. Antricker were watching the Disney Plus show, The World According to Jeff Goldblum. Fun little show. And we learned that denim, as in blue jeans and the fabric denim, is actually from France, from a place called Denim. Did not know that. So the stitch pattern of denim, what makes it so strong and everything, is actually a French invention from the I don't know if it's the province or town or whatever of Denim. So there you go. You get credit for that one, Luke. Denim and French fries. And I know you didn't really make French fries. And so, yes, and people talking about the sound. I know I screwed that up. And so, and oh, Luke, you didn't know that either? I'm shocked. I am absolutely shocked. That you didn't know that. I figured that you would know that one. It seems like, because everybody knows that champagne comes from champagne, but I did not know that denim came from denim, which we were both, Mrs. Antricker and I agreed it would actually sound better if we called them denim jeans than denim jeans, but that's just the way it is. Not Ryan Johnson is here, says hello out there, YouTube land. How you doing, Ryan? Carlos says, when they say that Mary was a virgin, did they mean she didn't have sex, or that she was true and pure and she was as good as anyone could be? Well, actually, it is very clear in the Bible that it says that she had never been with a man. So there is that. But it is also stated in the Bible that she was true and pure and virtuous, that she was among women, the most virtuous woman around at her time. And so the answer to you really, Carlo, is yes to both. Well, actually, the debate is still up on whether or not French fries are French or Belgian. I prefer to call them French because I hate the Belgian even more than I hate the French. So that's just my opinion. And actually, it's funny, Luke, because that goes back a long ways. I know this is kind of off topic, but when I was a kid, we had an exchange student from Belgium whose name was Luke, spelt like yours, L-U-C. And man, the guy was just a complete dick. He's the only person in my entire life that I ever actually picked a fight with, a physical altercation. And so that didn't go very well. Luke says denim, denims means from Nimes, the actual city. Well, there you go. That must be it then. Chrono says, hi, Anti-Tricker. Oh, wait, it's Rational Roundtable. How annoying. I know, but it's a necessary evil because of YouTube. Jeff says, what does the shirt say? The shirt says, another in the fire. This is actually one thing that our church does is about 3 or 4 times a year. They do what's called worship night, where they have special events. Basically, it's a free concert. And sometimes they're done in a public setting. Sometimes they're done at our church. This was one of them. Each one has a theme. And Another in the Fire is not referring to... Because I didn't like the title of this one, honestly. Because I see that, and I see, what, you're throwing people into hell or something? That's what it kind of looks like. But they're talking about being on fire for God kind of thing. And so that was just the theme of that one. And there was actually and the theme is based on a song that is sung during the event. Luke says, "Wow, so much hatred." Well, those Belgians, they're even worse than the French. All right, so let's see. Luke says, hated the French because he thought Belgians and French were the same. That's just horrible. And let's see here. Back to I'm missing stuff here in the chat. Sorry. Mr. Miles says, "Oh, you're already live." First, I told you I was going live, Miles. Right when I sent you that stuff that you're looking at. So yeah. Um, and do you listen to any Christian rock music? Asked Carlo. Not often. I will tell you, most of it sucks. And this is something that I don't like. Most Christian produced media sucks. It's clearly behind the curve as far as production quality. You look at Christian movies; they almost across the board suck. If you listen to Christian music, most of it pales in comparison to secular music. And the problem is that, honestly, Christians have this is a real problem within the community. Christians have a tendency to not basically put the time and effort into learning the technical side of things, because they say, "Oh well, God will direct me. God will bless this. God will do this," and it's like, yeah, God doesn't expect you to not learn how to operate the equipment. He's not going to just, it's one of those things. Like even yesterday when we went to church, Corey was talking, and I thought this was actually really good, where he was saying that he would have people come into his office and say, "Oh, Corey, please pray for my finances. I don't have a job. I don't know what to do." And Corey says, "Well, how many jobs have you applied for?" "Well, none." "Well, go apply for a job." You know, yes, you pray. Yes, you give reverence to God, but yes, you have to take action. So you still have to fill out the job application and go for the interview and dress nice and all that and do your best, and and go through the process like any other person. Same thing is true with Christian media. Unfortunately, they don't. They a lot of people will say, "Oh well, God will take care of all the details." That's not how it works. And Michael Lebowitz just subscribed. I don't know if it was to this channel or to the. I think it's to this channel. I think the other one's turned off, but I'm not sure. So welcome, Michael, if you're here. Um, so with Christian media, same thing. Like Christian movie makers just say, "Oh well, just give me the camera and I'll point it at the people, and they'll be able to, and everybody will believe them because they're Christians, and it just comes across as terrible, absolutely terrible." So there is some good Christian music out there. I'm not saying it's all bad. Like there's a few that I like. The KJ52 I think is a lot of fun. There's the classic. Oh gosh, now I'm forgetting their names. Who is it that did the Jesus Freak album? Oh man. Anyway, those guys. There's a few bands that I like, but they're very few and far in between, unfortunately. So that's a long-winded answer to what you said, Carlo. Dan says, "Do you like the phrase 'in our heavenly Father'?" Don't really have much of an opinion on it whatsoever. Mr. Brown says, "You said you were going live shortly after, but I got into it for a second after that." No worries, my friend. I know you're still, this may be the other channel, but you're still forever first, except for when Mrs. Anti-Checker is here, in which case you're number 2. Are you watching all the Star Wars Episode 9 TV spots? I've seen too many of them. I don't like them. The more I see of Episode 9, the more it looks like a train wreck getting ready to happen. The campy humor is just, it's so not Star Wars, and it just is not landing. So, yeah, I'm not liking what we're seeing so far. Bird of Prey says, "I hate Christian-produced media, anti-checker. Honestly, Christians have a tendency of being lazy." Wow. I'm being honest, Bird. I am being honest. Miss Anti-checker says, "Love POD." Yes, POD is also, they're kind of a crossover band. Miss Anti-checker and I do both love POD. But they're kind of a crossover band in that they're a Christian band, but they don't sing Christian songs, right? Like their songs have positive themes and stuff like that, but they're not like, "Oh, Jesus is great," that's not the lyrics of their songs. And Kronos forgot what he was going to say. Sorry about that, Kronos. So someone needs to edit together a video of Andy Tricker sipping his drink. It would be like an hour long. Well, yeah, that's how I get these live streams to stretch out as long as I do. Bird of Prey saying Jesus take the wheel because he's just being a jerk. If you don't learn how to operate the equipment, you could get an electric shock. You could exactly, and the thing is that you need to, it's annoying because being a Christian, it's like what I do right now, right? When I'm doing, you see some Christians do YouTube streams, and they'll have a $5 microphone that they got from their uncle who got it at Radio Shack in 1992, and the webcam looks like someone smeared Vaseline all over it or something, and they don't understand why they don't have 100,000 subscribers. That's just not how it works. You got to put the work in, no matter what. Nowhere in the Bible to say, "Oh yeah, be lazy." So you're saying you don't like Christian rap? No, not at all. KJ52, the first artist I mentioned, is a Christian rapper, and there's another one named T-Bone that I actually like. Kronos, do you like Skillet? I do like Skillet. DC Talk, thank you, Track 95. Yes, DC Talk. They're kind of a their album Jesus Freak, I think, is their one truly great album. The rest of their music is good, but not great, if that makes sense. So that's kind of where that is. God doesn't want you to think that God's going to do everything for you, but you pray so God can do it for you. Is that what some think? Kind of, yes. And that's the problem, is that nowhere in the Bible does it say God's going to make your life easy. It does not say that anywhere in the Bible. The only, you basically, and in fact, the Bible flat out says, Jesus tells the disciples, in this life there will be trouble. You are not going to simply get a free pass on life just because you happen to be a believer. It doesn't work that way. And that's what a big problem within Christianity, quite frankly, is that people that have that kind of belief system are commonly people who have never had real adversity in their lives, right? You have people that will, they're upper middle class, and they, so they never really had to struggle financially. They go to church and they pray and everybody's happy, and they meet their perfect spouse, and then something bad happens, right? Because let's be real, something bad happens to everybody. It doesn't matter if you're rich, poor, black, white, whatever. Something bad will happen. Nobody has a perfect life. And so that something bad happens, and all of a sudden that person is just destroyed. Their faith is gone because they felt like, well, but God is supposed to prevent me from having a bad time. No, it doesn't say that. And Track 95 says, sorry, DC Talk is here. No, I got it. Thank you. And Mr. Miles likes being number 2. Chrono says, hi to Mrs. Anti-Tricker. Of course, everybody likes Mrs. Anti-Tricker more than me. I get it. I put one of those YouTube relaxing sleep music 24/7 channels on. It was a great night's sleep. Ooh, I should try that. I've been having so much trouble sleeping, Bird. It's driving me crazy. And I know you, you deal with lack of comfort like I have. And so it's like, I can't sleep it's been driving me crazy. I can't sleep for more than an hour, ever. And so like last night, I went to bed at like, 10 o'clock, woke up by 11, tossed and turned a little bit, got back to sleep about 11:30, woke up at about 12:30, tossed and turned for a little bit, and it's been, and wash, rinse, repeat all night long. I'm exhausted. I am absolutely exhausted because I can't sleep for more than an hour to maybe sometimes 2 hours at a time. Luke says, caricature alert, theist repair thinking, why is this stuff broken? I'll pray for God to fix it. Atheist repair method, how is this stuff broken? How can I fix it? Well, actually, and this is something that atheists actually do have an edge over Christians on, is that Christians do tend to, the funny thing is the Bible says to rely on God, but what they mean isn't that God's going to do it for you. But more that God is going to support you as you do it. But people get that confused. They think God's just going to do all the heavy lifting. Aberjam says, greetings, brother. How do we know that the Apostle Paul was a vegetarian? Because he started every letter with grapes and peas to you. That's horrible, Aberjam. Man. Tromer says, greetings. How you doing, my friend? Chrono says, I'm not blue. Well, I'll take that as a good thing. DC Talk and Stripper all the way. I don't know who Stripper is, so I assume that's another band, or you're making a joke that I don't get. Fractal Machine says, "Hey Michael, may I ask what is this stream about specifically?" Well, Fractal Machine, it doesn't have today. We don't have a specific topic. However, on the Rational Roundtable streams, I open it up. We talk about theology. We talk about the stuff that you can't talk about on YouTube. This channel, I don't care if it never gets monetized. That's just the way it goes. If people do want to pitch in to help support the channel, the description below has the link to do so. But this channel is not, even if if Anti-Trekker continues to grow and Anti-Trekker gets to the point where me and Mr. Miles are making a full-time living off of it, awesome. This channel, that will never be the goal. This channel is just about mainly talking about theology, but any topics that are not appropriate to talk about on the Anti-Trekker channel. Corona says he feels naked. Well, put some clothes on. And let's see. Audio is more important than video, even on YouTube. 100% correct. You actually, and that's why this is the big expensive thing that I have. This microphone. This is a professional microphone. And I always tell people if they're thinking about getting into podcasting or YouTube or anything like that, invest in a mic first. That should be your number one priority. Is this what it feels like to be Mr. Miles in the olden days? Naked, you mean? I'm not sure what you mean. Carlos says, when it says we're made in his image, I think more about consciousness and the way we think more than the way we look. What do you think? I tend to think that as well. That God, like us, has, he has emotions like us. He thinks about things like us. He enjoys companionship like we do. He enjoys fellowship like we do. So yes, I do think that. The difference, though, is that God is holy, meaning he's complete. He isn't in need of things like we are. And so, like, for example, most of us, not all, but most of us require a mate, right? We have to have that other person in our life to feel whole. God doesn't need that, right? And so, and that's why, when people say, well, is God a man or a woman? Well, I'll say I refer to God as he simply out of convenience, and that's how it's listed in the Bible. However, I think that God is beyond what we would call gender. He doesn't need a gender. And let's see. Their music went down later on. I first saw them live before they hit big. It was truly amazing music. Wow, you saw them live? Very cool. I've never seen a good Christian band live, unfortunately. Seen Weird Al live a couple of times, though. Corona says, I have trouble with adversity. Well, we all do. That is a problem. That I know that, adversity hits us all, and that's where the real test of our faith is. It's not in, the genuine test of adversity is what do we do when we're down, right? How do we deal with our depression, our anxiety, stuff like that? Do we run to drugs? Do we run to sex? Do we run to distraction? Do we run to God? And that is where God truly shines as far as when he can help. You guys know, I have had an extraordinary rough year this year. This has just been, both physical and mental anguish for me all year. And I can honestly say that God has done more for me than any medication or anything like that I've had along the way. Yes, the medication and stuff, or when I was in Oregon, the herbal remedies were wonderful as far as helping to alleviate the pain, but that didn't take care of the underlying anguish over all this. That was on God. Angry Mango, love your avatar, Angry Mango, and welcome. I don't think I've seen you before. Says Anti-Trekker, hope you and your lovely wife have a nice Thanksgiving. Happy great day, everyone. Aloha. You must be in Hawaii, and like I said, love your avatar. That is like the best avatar I've seen all day. By the way, I think bad Christians losing their faith become bad atheists. Well, it's a funny thing because I know that, another thing that people say is, does being a Christian make you a better person? Well, it should theoretically, if you have a genuine relationship with God and you really want to align yourself with God's will, it should make you a better person. But all too commonly, what happens is if you have a racist who's a non-believer and then they become a Christian, you now have a racist who's a Christian. That's the problem. Um, but you need to let that go. And the problem is that people don't want to let go of their old selves. That's honestly more than anything else. One of the biggest problems in the church is that people cling on to the way they were before they became Christians, and they refuse to let go, which prevents them from really experiencing the joy of being a Christian. Luke says, I mean, they don't get it no matter their belief. Yeah, you're right. I agree, and that's the thing, because a faithless Christian that leaves and then becomes an atheist usually just becomes a bitter atheist. We might here to let's see, we might be here to guide or help someone else improve humanity, not our lives. Like Anti-Trekker's knee is hard for him and family, but it's brought us together and is helping us because of his pain. Thank you, Carl. That's actually that is a very biblical approach to it, because the Bible says that God uses all things for the good. And so, yes, sometimes life sucks, but there's always a purpose to it. And that's, I think, what helps the Christians dealing with the, when you're struggling in life, when you're in pain, when you're in anguish, when you're dealing with bad stuff. It doesn't, obviously the pain doesn't go away. You're not going to go, woohoo, I love being in pain all the time. But it's the idea that it is ultimately for a purpose that helps encourage you, that helps move you, and changes your perspective on things. And so, as the term goes, suffer with pride, right? And that that there is a reason behind it, and whatever that, you may never see that reason come to fruition, but it's out there. Mrs. Anti-Checker talking about music some more, talks about Cutlass, Pillar, Jars of Clay, Lighthouse, and a lot of Christian rap. Yes, Mrs. Anti-Checker. Mrs. Anti-Checker is way into music. I am not. I enjoy music. I don't there's very little music that I won't listen to. In fact, the only type of music that I will just shut out is opera. I don't like opera. Even though I love classical, but I don't like opera. But pretty much any genre of music I can have on and listen to and enjoy as long as it's well made. But Mrs. Antricker is into music, so yeah, that's her bag. And let's see. Carlos says, "I hope you're well soon." Thank you, Carlos. I hope so too. But you know what? Regardless, I mean, whether the leg gets better in a month, a year, or never. I'm glad to have found you guys. We built a community here on YouTube, and I'm so happy about that. And that's one reason that I say I'm thankful for things like The Last Jedi and the horrible abomination of Star Trek Discovery. Because as bad as those shows are, they've brought nerds together in a way that never, think about it, not just me, but Doomcock, Nerdrotic, Geeks and Gamers, Mecha Random, Lore Reloaded, and a host of other channels would not exist, or at least not exist nearly at the level that they are, if not for that garbage. So, yes. Shomer says, it is in the Bible in unambiguous language. Jesus said to his fathers, will suffer. He said he suffered, so for no servant is greater than the master. Yes. And that's something that Christians, it's so funny because this is that's something that really, really people don't grasp. Christians, it really bothers me that so many churches, and this is true, unfortunately, of the majority of churches out there, is what they'll do is rather than read the Bible, they will read selected verses from the Bible that are designed to support a particular agenda. So if your doctrine is, say, predestination above all else, then you will only read the verses that hint at predestination and skip everything else. If your doctrine is free will above everything else, then you will only read the scriptures that support free will. But you're taking all that out of context. You're not really absorbing the true meaning of the books as intended, and it's horrible. And that's honestly the biggest problem in the church today to me, is that nobody reads the whole damn Bible. Sorry for my language there. But And that's one of the reasons I love the church that I and Mrs. Anti-Trekker attend, because that is exactly what we do. We're currently working on the book of Ecclesiastes, where I think we just did chapter 11, and so we're almost done with it. Mr. Miles in all caps says, audio is not more important than video. Actually, it is, Mr. Miles. As much as your work enhances the videos, if the audio was like, nobody would watch it, even if it looked like the coolest thing ever. And yes, you can tell a story with images, but I'm talking about if you're trying to convey a message. Fractal, are atheist inputs welcome, even though I can comment on biblical translation topics as well as a native Hebrew speaker? Oh yeah, and well, Luke is an atheist, Mr. Miles is an atheist. It's, yeah, we do not, just because I happen to be a Christian doesn't mean atheists can't speak up. The only thing that and Luke and I have gone, butted heads a little bit on it, but I won't get into a deep, hardcore debate with an atheist on most biblical topics, unless as far as well, what about, did this happen, because usually the problem is that atheists tend to reject the authority of scripture, and so it's hard to have common ground to speak on. Like, if I say, well, this is right because it's in the Bible, to you that sounds ridiculous, because no, just because it's in the Bible doesn't make it right. That just means it's in the Bible. And that's because you don't take the Bible as an authoritative source, that it is actually inspired of God. You think it's just a book. And so that's a genuine problem in having an open and honest discussion with atheists and Christians specifically. Luke says, you mean God doesn't have gender? Well, not in the traditional sense. I mean, after all, think about it. God is, and this is, and you think about this, Luke, this is not a matter of theology as much as logic. If God is a singular being, right, if you're a monotheist, then who could God reproduce with, right? There is no gender if there's only one. That's my point. Now, maybe God comes across, and in fact, the Jews actually, like one thing that, and I'm not an expert on the Jewish religion, but I do know this much, is that, the great Leonard Nimoy, may he rest in peace, when he came up with this for the Vulcan salute, well, this is based on a Jewish hand gesture that rabbis would use, which is to signify the feminine aspect of God, which Christians don't really talk about, but so in the Jewish tradition, yes, God has masculine and feminine qualities in a singular being. And Mr. Miles, of course, I'm not trying to discount the value of video. You know that. Chrono says, getting 6 to 12 inches of snow here today. Oh, I am jealous. I would love to have that kind of snow. Unfortunately, here in Tennessee, we occasionally get an inch or two. I think the most we've gotten since we've lived here, we've been here about 6 years now, has been about 5 inches. Do you think God gets lonely that there are no other beings like himself? That's an interesting question. Yes and no. I don't think that he's lonely in the sense that he's like depressed or anything like that, because I do think that God being holy, he doesn't need to have companionship, but I think he enjoys companionship, and I think that is a large part of why we exist. I think that one of the reasons that God encourages us to pray so much is that he enjoys that. He likes that communion with us. And there's Mr. Miles saying same thing I said to Fractal Machine, because I'm behind in the chat, which by the way is normal. If you are new to this to the channel, yes, I'm almost always behind in the chat, especially on the Rational Roundtable streams, because we tend to get into more deep topics than whether or not phasers or photon torpedoes are more powerful weapons. Let's see. You need more of these live streams. I'll tell you, Kronos, and I think I think it was you I was talking to on Discord about it, was that if and when we get to where we can do this full time so that I don't have to work, and once my leg is feeling a little better, then my intent is to do Rational Roundtable streams probably at least 3 times a week, where I would still do the Anti-Trekker streams probably five times a week like I do now. But for Rational Roundtable, I would do it at least 3 times a week because I really enjoy these conversations. But I also have to be real in that as much as I love doing the Rational Roundtable side of things, it doesn't pay the bills. And so I have to focus on the anti-trick. I have to give it a little more attention because if I don't, then, we go broke. Um, let's see. Track 95 says, how should we express our feelings of depression without sounding like pity me? Well, honestly, Track 95, it's about being honest. Here's the thing, and this is something that we don't do well in the church, and this is another thing that I really like about our church is that we try to combat this directly, is if somebody says, how are you doing? Don't say fine if you're depressed. You say, actually, I've been feeling really depressed lately. And then have a conversation about it. But where you come across as pity me is if you walk into a room and you tell them, man, I feel depressed. All right, that's pity me. But if someone says, hey, Trek 95, I know what your name is, but I don't want to use that here unless you gave me permission. So, hey, Trek 95, how you feeling today? Oh, actually, I'm feeling depressed. Now, assuming that person is your friend, the next thing out of their mouth is going to be, well, what's going on? And then you can talk to them about it, and sharing your burden with that other person can sometimes lift the depression. Or if it's not enough, that's where you start seeking out professional counseling and stuff, which I do. I see a therapist once a week. I have been for several months now, and it's helpful. But that's just, we all have to deal with it sometimes. But the main thing I think is just be open and honest. Don't try to bury it and don't try to overly emphasize it. Darth Ren says, honestly, I feel like God's abandoned Earth or doesn't care. Well, actually, if you read what the Bible says, I wouldn't say abandoned is the right term, but he left it to us. That is in the Bible. If you look at Genesis, basically God gave us the earth, but at the same time, he also cursed the earth because of what Adam and Eve did. So what happens on earth is ultimately man's responsibility, not God's. And let's see here. Chrono says, ha! You said Klingon. Did I? Okay. I'll try not to in the future. Mr. Miles still arguing about the importance of video and audio. I will tell you this, Mr. Miles. It depends on the type of presentation, obviously. But let's say, like, if you were to look at a movie like, say, Star Trek 5. Star Trek 5 has bad special effects, bad writing, and bad, just everything about it is pretty much bad. If you were to take a film and have an awesome story, awesome characters and all that, but the visual effects still sucked, it would still be, so people would still love it. The visuals are icing on the cake. They can make it go from good to great. You can only get so far on audio. But if you start with a foundation of poor audio, it cannot succeed. Audio is the foundation. Video is what makes that foundation more appealing. Untested faith is no faith at all. Like a muscle, if you don't exercise, it becomes weak and ineffective. That's a really good way to put it, Aberjam. And the problem is we have a lot of people, because the United States, people don't realize how spoiled we are in this country. People don't realize what a luxury it is that we don't have to walk to a well to get our water, right? That anytime we want, we can go to the store and buy food. People don't understand what a luxurious lifestyle we truly live. And because of that, we become, we're weak. We don't understand what it's like to go through adversity, not real adversity. Darren Wagner's in the house, says, good morning. How you doing, my friend? Always good to see you. And I know you said that at 8:30. It's now 8:42. So, yeah, I'm behind. Dan says, do you think that because of carbon emissions need to be down, we should not eat meat? No. I don't believe that, and nor do I think we should stop having babies just because of carbon emissions. I think that if we really want to take on carbon emissions, then we need to look at industrial carbon emissions. That's and primarily, by the way, automobiles create a huge amount of carbon emissions. Factories create a huge amount of carbon emissions, and people want to blame it on the cows now because it's just liberals trying to say, "Oh, be a vegetarian." Quite frankly, I think that's a load of crap. I think that if you really want to combat carbon emissions, then we need to come up with clean cars. We need to come up with clean factories, and by the way, and design things that will reduce the carbon in the atmosphere, not just reduce the amount that we're spewing out. Like the idea of carbon scrubbers, where you can actually remove some of the carbon emissions from the exhaust of a factory. Well, what if you constructed some kind of carbon scrubber that would just be out there, that you would just put out to just clean the air? Is there a way to do something like that? I think there should be. I don't know if there is, but that would be a cool thing. But no, do I think we should all become vegetarians because of global warming? No. I've been told people looking to join the church that the biggest obstacle to them is doing so is bad Catholics. I, being a Catholic, find them equally repulsive. Well, I don't know about bad Catholics specifically, but I do understand that a lot of people see the hypocrisy in Christians and don't want anything to do with it. I get that. Unfortunately, it's just a fact of life that the majority of Christians are Christians in name only. Chrono says, you don't like music, unsubbing. Well, I didn't say I don't like music. I said that I'm not into music like Mrs. Antichecker. That's all. Bird of Prey says, does God want you to take a certain herbal ingredient? If yes, is it not your duty to procure some? That's an interesting question. I'm going to get some more coffee going, speaking of herbal ingredients. Bear with me, Bird. So, do I think that herbal ingredient, and actually, since we're on this channel, I'll say it. So, cannabis, I know that's what we're talking about, right? It helps a lot of people with chronic pain. When I was visiting my daughter in Oregon, oh man, it really helped with the knee and stuff. It was great. Now, does God want you to take it? I don't know that he wants me to take it. I didn't get a letter from God saying, hey, Michael, take some of that. However, I do happen to fall into the belief that it is there for a reason. And if it helps people, particularly people suffering with chronic pain, then like any medication, it should be used. However, the Bible also clearly says that we are to obey the law. And so that's why, until it is legalized in Tennessee, I'm kind of stuck. But I'm confident that eventually it will be legalized. Carlos says, when I saw my ex, I knew that she would have my child, and I kept seeing her everywhere, and we did have a son together. We didn't work, but we did have a child. I knew we would. Okay, that's cool. Well, when I first saw Mrs. Antricker, I knew I was going to marry her. So, yeah. Aberjam says, if God is real and God is love, why do we live in such a crappy world? Why doesn't he just put a stop to all the crappiness? Because God also loves us enough to let us live our lives the way we want to. It's a tough thing. As a parent, I know it can be very tough. I see the way that my daughter lives, and I wish I could just make all the bad things in her life go away. But I have to let her live her life. I can't control everything. And if I could control, like God could take away our free will and just make everything so that it's perfect and all that. And guess what? It would be meaningless. It would be absolutely meaningless. Because without the ability to fail, success means nothing. Further, that without free will, without the ability to choose God or choose otherwise, then choosing God means nothing. So, as far as, the world sucking, well, that I think was going to happen. no matter what. Nuke says, professional cherry picking, regardless of the religion or anything, that's what they do in life, and religion is no different field for them. Well, that's true of a lot of denominations and individuals in the church, unfortunately. Cronus says, I read the Bible 25 years or so ago. Read it again. And I'm not saying that to be snide or anything, because the Bible is a very, very deep, multi-layered document. And so if the last time you really got into it was 25 years ago, and I know you're a Christian, Kronos, you've told me that before, but if the last time you truly read the Bible was 25 years ago, get back into it, because you're 25 years older, wiser, and have had 25 years of experience to reflect on some of the stuff that's in there, and it may hit you in a very different way than it did 25 years ago. I will tell you that I read the entire Bible cover to cover. The last time I did that was probably about 5-6 years ago, around there. But as we go through these whole books of the Bible at the church we go to, we get to Ecclesiastes, and I'm like, wow, that hit me a lot differently than it did the last couple of times. So that's interesting. And so I do recommend revisiting it. Mr. Londell is in the house, says, you simply are not experienced the right opera as of yet. You should start with something simple like Percival's Albadelzer. Great story, and it's an early English opera. Well, maybe, you know what, Mr. Londell, send me a link to it on Discord, and I will try to give it a listen. I'm not going to promise you, but I will try. And so, let's see. And Mr. Miles is still arguing over the importance of audio and video, which is cool. You know what, Mr. Miles? And here's the thing. Mr. Miles is very passionate about video effects, video editing, and all that stuff. And that's why my recent videos have looked so much better, is because of Mr. Miles' hard work. And I am not going to sit there and say that, well, you know, that Borg video hit over 100,000 views just because of my incredible voice. No, I think that Mr. Miles' visuals had a lot to do with that. That being said, if it sounded like, today we're going to talk about the Borg, then no matter how good it looked, it wouldn't have gotten any views. Darth Vader says, sorry if I seem angry. Things suck at the moment. Finding it hard at the moment. I will be okay. You know what, Darth? It's okay. First of all, we're all friends here. Then that's the thing. If you're angry, if things suck, talk about it. That's what friends are for. We're not just here to talk about photon torpedoes, right? As fun as that is, and the origin of the Borg and stuff like that. That stuff is all fun and gravy. But when one of us is hurting, then and you guys have seen it time and time again, you know, the rest of us need to step up, offer encouragement, talk on Discord and stuff, because I can't do it all. I wish I could, but I can't, you know, and this is a hard fact that I'm learning, you know, especially now the channel is over 12,000 subscribers. I will tell you that, and Mrs. Antrim drives her nuts sometimes, my phone is going off 24/7 with tweets and messages on Discord and messages through antitracker.com, and I can't keep up. It's not possible. There are times where I'll have 200-300 messages stacked up that I can't get to. However, the nerd community that we're building, I've seen it where people say, oh man, this sucks, and then someone else will say, well, let's talk about it, and then they'll talk on Discord or whatever, and that's what it's for. That's why I want the Discord server. That's why I won't get rid of the Discord server, because I want you guys to have an avenue to talk to each other, not just reach out to me. Let's see. Jeff says, I was looking last night at Bible information. I found a site that showed inconsistencies of the Bible. I was surprised by how many contradictions there are. Well, this is an interesting problem with biblical translation and as far as inconsistencies in the Bible. Depends on how you're approaching it. Are you looking at it in proper context and all that? Many of the inconsistencies we see are simple translation problems. And sometimes they're things that are really of no major significance, right? For example, if it says in one verse that this army had 10,000 soldiers, and in another verse it says the army had 15,000 soldiers, and suddenly people say, see, it's wrong. That was probably somewhere along the lines the translation was messed up, and it got messed up, but doesn't change the essence of what's being said if there's 10,000 or 15,000. The answer is no. It doesn't change anything at all. There are very, very few things in the Bible where you will find something that truly changes the meaning. Now, there are examples of some that are. However, those are also, like if you pick up almost any modern translation of the Bible, and I believe if it's Mark, if I'm remembering correctly, I could be wrong, but I think it's the book of Mark. If you turn to the last chapter of Mark, I think it's Mark 16, you will see an asterisk saying these passages are in question. Almost every translation of the Bible will say something to the effect of these passages were not in the earliest manuscripts, or something to that effect, that these are not necessarily legit. And so there, it's not like that's not known. The problem, the biggest problem with the Bible itself is the fact that we don't have the original. That would be very nice. Luke says, interesting, Jewish scholars have recognized archaeological foundings showcasing that Judaism has been a polytheistic religion before becoming monotheistic. Never heard that before, but okay. Chronos says, Rational Roundtable, if you love snow so much, you can bloody well shovel it. Well, or you can just enjoy it. For the first statues of Jesus were made to look as a feminine male. Well, first of all, Jesus is not physically described in the Bible. So any statue, any painting, any representation of Jesus you see anywhere is wrong. No, we don't know what he looked like. They worship three gods, the Father, the Mother, the Son. It seems as though schools of belief evolved to merge the Father and the Mother into one God. Yahweh and the Son became the Messiah. That's interesting, although the interesting thing about that, Luke, though, is so why is that nowhere in Jewish scripture? Insomnia got to love it before work week. How you doing, Aunt Trekker? Hanging in there? I am hanging in there, fed, but yeah, insomnia, it sucks. And Eric says, I had a few discussions with an atheist boiled down to having faith. One has it or they don't. Well, faith, actually, be careful about that term, because and I did a video on this channel about a faith versus belief. It really boils down to belief more than faith. Faith is a matter of trusting God. Belief is believing in the existence of God. And the problem that we have is some people say you choose to believe or not to believe. Other people say that no, belief or non-belief is simply an instinctual reaction to the what you are exposed to. I think that it's a combination of the two, to be honest with you. I think there is a matter of choice in there, and the problem is that it's difficult to see God until you believe in God, and that's why I mentioned it on my last week on this stream, where Corey, the pastor of our church, did a whole series called "Believing is Seeing." The opposite of the old saying, "Seeing is believing," because it's very difficult to see God in a beautiful sunrise unless you believe God exists. Otherwise, you just see sun refracting off the clouds, creating these beams, blah, blah, blah. You don't see God in that. But when talking with an atheist, it really, the atheist, the problem is that both sides tend to be very close-minded when having a conversation. The theist is like, no, God exists and there's nothing you can say that's going to convince me otherwise. The atheist says, no, God doesn't exist and there's nothing you can say to convince me otherwise. If that's the attitude, then why have a conversation? And Chrono says, I do like these conversations. I'm glad. That's why I'm here. But, oh, great, the French are here. Yeah, I know. We can't figure out a way to, with all the wonderful advances in the YouTube algorithm, they haven't been able to figure out a way to filter out the French yet. Trek95 says, you are more than welcome to use my name here. Okay. Well, I didn't know, but I just, I always err on the side of caution. Do you listen to religious radio stations? Not often, Dan, because quite frankly, most preachers that I hear on, speaking on radio stations and stuff will give out some bad theology. Like very popular things are the prosperity gospel. The prosperity gospel is the idea that if you give money to the church, and Aaron just subscribed, I don't know to which channel, but Aaron, if you're here, welcome. That the prosperity gospel is the idea that if you give, if you tithe and everything, then God will give you back tenfold or whatever. That basically God is guaranteeing that you're going to have lots and lots of money as long as you're a good Christian. That is a load of crap. It is not in the Bible, and you hear it constantly on the radio. Why? Because they want you to call their 800 number and give. Because it's a business. I get that. But you know what? Preaching the prosperity gospel to people is, quite frankly, horrible in my opinion. And I hope that those people realize their mistakes. Or if they know that they're making mistakes, then they're just not really believers. They're just doing it because they're trying to make money. And let's see, Luke says, is Western lifestyle really be spoiled here, or in fact just forgetful and ungrateful for all those hard-working predecessors that built it? Well, spoiled and being ungrateful and forgetful are kind of the same thing. And keep in mind, I'm not saying that, we don't realize how good we have it. Spoiled just means that you feel like this is the norm, right? Most people in the United States and Western Europe feel like their lifestyle is the norm. This is how people live. And that they have real hardship because they got to pay the bills, or because they have, they had surgery on their knee, right? Oh man, the hardship. When they don't think about the fact that you realize that the majority of the world's population couldn't get knee surgery if their life depended on it. So, yes, I would say that those are synonymous. Spoiled and ungrateful, kind of the same thing here. And Kronos says, oh, I understand, I'm spoiled. I know you are, Kronos. Mr. Londell says, a prime example of special effects not making a movie great would be The Last Starfighter. The story was made, is what made the movie, not the special effects. Well, yeah, the special effects in The Last Starfighter kind of suck. And man, am I far behind. And there goes, the chat just jumped on me, so bear with me while I rewind. There we go. Darth, speaking of spew, Billy D. Williams is gender fluid now. Oh, whatever. I think the label liberal is a term that is used too loosely. There's a wide range, just like not all conservatives believe exactly the same thing. That's a fair point. I generally, when I'm talking about a liberal agenda or something like that, I'm not talking about your rank and file Democrat in the United States. I don't know what the liberal parties are over in Europe. But I'm generally speaking about far left progressives, the Hollywood type, the SJW type, the hardcore. Just like, I know that a lot of people, when they talk about conservatives, they're really talking about, what they refer to as the alt-right, the hard right, the crazy right-winger. The majority of people are not that. Richie says, climate change is real and Star Trek V sucks. Okay, I agree on both points, but not understanding why you're saying that. I got a 24-hour Facebook ban for saying under the Billy D. Williams post, oh, cool, I'm a toaster, and then in response, stop oppressing me, like that was hate speech. Wow. But you see, that's the new norm, is that and that's the problem, that's one of the reasons that this channel is where I'm streaming right now. And in fact, one thing I'm working on is I'm going to actually not physically, but digitally separate the Rational Roundtable channel from the Anti-Tricker channel. Because right now, the two channels are linked. They're under the same Google account. I'm going to change that. I'm going to create a secondary Google account for the Rational Roundtable channel to make sure there's a clear separation between the two. Because it is getting to the point where, yes, if you dare to speak against the far left, then you will be labeled as a racist, as a homophobe, as a hate speech person, or whatever, and banned. And so, and of course, especially since the Anti-Tricker channel is making money, the last thing I want is to get it shut down. Gary says, did Rational Roundtable just condone failing up? Michael Crawford is an Obama supporter, confirmed. I was not an Obama supporter. By the way, nor was I a Trump supporter. So, yeah. What people don't often understand is that the Bible is not intended for the profane or non-clerical. It's a scholar's book made for a scholar in a language understood by them only. You know that there's some interesting debate about that, because keep in mind that the Bible is not a singular book. It is actually a collection of 66 books. On some of those books, you're absolutely right. In others of those books, I think that they are written for the commoner. I do remember Job more than anything, Rational Roundtable, even after so many years. Yeah, I'll tell you, Job is a powerful story. Definitely worth rereading, but also, and I mean this, Cronus, look up, and it's spread, I don't remember exactly where it is, but if you look up the topic online, you can find references to it. The whole story of Jacob. Read everything there is about Jacob. I think that'll help you right now, Kronos. Gary says, audio, videos matters less than content. I have friends who have zero production quality, crappy phone, no lights, no music, almost 100,000 subs. Content trumps production value. That's true too. I will give you that. Do you like churches or religious places in hospitals and airports? Well, I don't object to them existing. As far as like if there's a chapel at an airport or a hospital, and of course, keep in mind, the hospital is a religious concept. I know a lot of people don't know this, but there was no such thing as a hospital until the church created the hospital. It is, in fact, a religious idea. So, no, I do not object. And in fact, many hospitals to this day are run by churches. And in fact, where I had my knee surgery is a religious hospital. It's a Catholic hospital that I went to. And so they give you the option, do you want a priest to come in and, all that, but which I didn't need, but yeah. I will be honest, I love being able to actually talk to people where it's harder to hear. Okay, that's weird. Do you like the phrase, you can't put a price on God's words? Never heard that phrase before, but it's not bad. I got Discord at some time this year. Nothing happened since the moment I installed it. Okay. Are you on Discord, like, talking to people? You have to, let's see. Average says, cold fusion waffles. You have to be seen here. I'm not sure. Oh, you have to put the at Rational Roundtable to be seen here. Yes, thank you. If Cold Fusion, I see, because Cold Fusion Waffles puts up an anti-trade. Thank you for pointing that out, Averjam. But Cold Fusion Waffles said, Antricker, this happens every Sunday. Gonna sit my atheist butt down and listen, because I'm not that edgy evangelical atheist anymore. Even I don't believe, I see religion and community as good. Thank you. And yes, the Rational Roundtable streams will be every Sunday for the foreseeable future. And of course, once I can do YouTube full time, they'll expand probably to 3 days a week. That's my plan. Luke says, why is Akhenathon nowhere in Egyptian scriptures? I don't know, Luke. I don't know who Akhenathon is. And let's see. Sunrise. Carry on. Yes, I know, Darren. I know. Jeff says, I don't want to ruin your faith, but this site has a huge list of inconsistencies in the Bible. Some where passages say exactly the opposite of what other passages say. I understand that, Jeff, and I have looked at some of those lists. But yeah, they don't ruin my faith. I still trust God, regardless of whether or not there are errors in modern translations of the Bible. And again, I say, unless you can, basically, unless you find a passage in the Bible where Jesus says, eat, drink, and be merry, then, probably not what, that's probably not what he's meaning. And in fact, one thing that's interesting as far as understanding the context of the Bible is read Ecclesiastes. There are 3 books of the Bible written by Solomon. Solomon was considered the wisest man who ever lived, right? And so if you look at Ecclesiastes, this was the book that he wrote when he was an old man, and basically full of regret and talking about how he wasted his life. And you can take some of those passages out of context and say, see, the Bible says that you should just go out and party all the time, because it does in fact say that. in the book of Ecclesiastes. In context, surrounded by the whole overall thing of regret that this is going to lead to a negative experience. And so the problem is that people will take, and this is the same thing the churches do, Jeff, is people will take this scripture and say, see, they say the opposite without reading the whole passage and realizing, like, for example, let's say that you see a passage of scripture that says, you know what, you should always eat pork. And then another passage that says, you know what, you should never eat pork. And you would say, see, the Bible contradicts itself, until you happen to read that the one that says you should always eat pork, it actually says before it, remember, those idiots say you should always eat pork, right? And then all of a sudden it has the opposite meaning. And so that's a big problem with some of these lists that I've seen, because many of them just ignore context. But then the other thing is, unless you can show me what these inconsistencies actually show a completely different, like that there's some kind of conflicting theology, which I have yet to see, then I would dare say that there's a problem. That's right now I have not seen that. I have trouble listening to other people's ideas. Am I an SJW? No, and SJW has a very specific political agenda, not just not listening. I'm rewatching Enterprise. In Cold Front, Phlox talks about experiencing Earth's various religions. Okay, yeah, Phlox was an interesting character, but that's also kind of interesting because that means that they're acknowledging that Earth has religions. Gary says, Anatrekker is almost as behind as Bird of Prey. Yeah, I'm really far behind on this stream, but that happens on these church life streams because of the depth of the topics. Let's see. I used to be a bull-hated atheist type, not anymore. Well, I was actually kind of a dick of an atheist myself for quite a while. Mrs. Anatrekker can attest to that fact. And so when we first got together, I was definitely an atheist, and I was not a very nice one. It's very difficult to see God until you believe in God. This is what annoys atheists here. How can you be sure you're not just seeing things you want to see because you believe it? That's actually an interesting point, Luke. And the answer is, you can't. And that's something you have to accept. No, I can't prove that it's not a delusion on my part. Absolutely. But you know what? You can't prove that you're not deluded either. You're just denying that you're deluded about anything. And that's fine. I accept the fact that I could be wrong, that I could be completely nuts and all that. Do you? Like people seeing UFOs in every aerospatial phenomenon that happens to be unusual. Well, actually, first of all, UFO only means unidentified flying object. It doesn't necessarily mean an extraterrestrial spaceship. However, if you see something you've never seen before and you say, ooh, could that have been a flying saucer because it matches the description of a flying saucer, fine. That could actually be logical, even if it's incorrect. But as far as seeing God in things, that is on a different level. And it's hard to describe to a non-believer, Luke. It truly is. Because as a non-believer, you just can shrug it off and say, you were just seeing what you want to see. And I understand that because I used to say the exact same thing. About 30 years ago, I was saying exactly what you were saying. Just type in the name of the YouTube search. There are about 1,000 recordings of it. Just type in Henry Purcell. Well, you see, now you're making me do the work. While I can't do that while I'm doing the live stream. That's the problem, Mr. Lundo. That's why I said send it to me on Discord so I can check it out. Last Starfighter's visual effects are amazing for the day. I will definitely disagree with you on that, Gary. I was quite well aware of The Last Starfighter when it first came out. I saw it in theaters, and no, it was not particularly impressive, other than, ooh, look, that's a very nice-looking video game. You annoy me, let's see, Anti-Trigger Astro, you annoy me to not want to unsub you. Dad says, what exactly is gender fluid? I'm not sure I spelled it correctly. Gender fluid just means, it's just a way of saying, F you, I'm not going to conform to the binary male-female. That's all it really means. And quite frankly, it's a delusion. It is, and in fact, that's the funny thing. I was talking to Luke about delusion. You want to talk about delusion, Luke? How about the fact that the mental health community is condoning people having the delusion that they are not what gender they physically are, and will go so far as to let them not only convince themselves that they are a different gender that they are, but to mutilate their bodies to conform with this delusion. And this is considered normal in society now, that people are going to just mutilate themselves and change their organs around so that they can conform to a delusion that they have that they would rather be the other gender. And yet you want to suggest that I'm delusional because I see God in a sunset. I thought about running for local council, but if I ever would, I would be considered extreme right-wing because I care about Ireland and Irish and I'm not racist. It hurts my head. Yeah? Good luck with that. Sane people should not run for political office because they'll get destroyed. In Star Trek Starfleet, there's a philosophy that life is sacred and precious and they do no harm to life. So in TNG Season 2, what do you think of William Riker shooting his own clone? I thought that was kind of jacked up, actually. I think that if somebody cloned me illegally, while I may not like it, I wouldn't murder the clone because I would say that that is a living being. Gary said, I'm also not a Trump supporter nor a Hillary supporter. I was a Scott Walker guy. I'm trying to remember who it was that I voted for. It was the Libertarian, but now I'm forgetting his name. Chronos says, I don't remember Jacob. Few people do. Look him up. Jacob, his name was, he was born Jacob, brother of Esau. Eventually his name was changed to Israel. And he became obviously the father of the 12 tribes of Israel. But read his story, Chronos. It's powerful and meaningful. And I will tell you that it's had a significant impact on me these last... I really started studying Jacob about a month ago, and it has made a huge difference in my attitude about things. Can Kurogans be forgiven of their sins? Excellent question, Thomas. The answer is unknown at this point. We don't know. Let's see. Luke says, wrong. Hospitals existed before Christianism. The Greek had those too. Remember, hypocrites. Okay. Fine. You don't think that the hospital concept came from the church? Fine, Luke. You rejected a priest at a Catholic hospital. Now it makes sense. Okay. Not sure what you mean there. Captain MKG's in the house. Good to see you, Captain. Says, good morning, Rational Roundtable in the chat. Hope everyone is happy and healthy this morning. Take care, everyone. Thank you, my friend. Good to see you as always. Fractal says, regarding cannabis, God says in Genesis that he's given all the plants the field for us to eat. All plants would obviously include cannabis. I agree. However, that's where I say, but the Bible also says, particularly in the New Testament, that we are to obey the laws of the land. And if cannabis is banned where you live, you ought not partake. And so that's the same reason, like, for example, when doing reviews of movies and stuff, that I won't show clips and stuff to movies that I don't have a legit copy of. That's why I will actually buy a copy of The Last Jedi, so that when I do my Last Jedi review, you can't say that I stole it. I also do not condone BitTorrenting stuff that you don't have. Like, if you I know there are people that say, well, I'm not giving money to Disney Plus, so I'm just going to BitTorrent The Mandalorian. I'm not going to do that because that is theft. And I'm sorry, but Disney Plus is trying to make money like any other business. They put out fine quality content to do so, and I don't begrudge them that. Dan says, if you have 2 Google accounts and 2 YouTube accounts, make sure that the correct stuff gets uploaded to the right account, because it can be a mess if stuff gets in the wrong place. Very true. And it will make things a little tougher on me to have them separated, because like right now with a click of a button, I can switch between accounts, but that will change. You can't do the tube does you. Yeah, very true. That cup is utterly ridiculous. I have absolutely no idea what you're talking about. Chronos says, I'm liking Solomon. Yeah, Solomon was actually, a lot of people, because they don't realize that Solomon actually did write 3 books of the Bible. They just know that, okay, wasn't Solomon that really wise king? But you realize that part of the reason of his wisdom was he realized what a fruitless life he lived. And that's what Ecclesiastes is all about. I did not know this. The last time I read Ecclesiastes, I didn't get that context of it. And it puts it in a whole different light. And that's one thing I've really enjoyed going through Ecclesiastes in our church over the last couple of months. How do we know that King David was a biker? Because the roar of his triumph could be heard throughout the land. Very good. Luke says, because Akhenaton was erased in the records by the clergy, he tried to short circuit by installing a monotheism centered around him being is God's sole intermediary. I don't understand your point to that, Luke, but okay. I like how here we can get into deeper things and you can get further behind Bird of Prey because it's not an issue. Yeah, that's the thing. On this chat, if you get mad at me for falling behind, well, good luck. Gary says, wow, didn't like the last Starfighter when it was released. Okay, Boomer. Actually, I liked the movie, Gary. As far as fantasy fulfillment, that is where the movie really, really took off. Because I was about if I remember correctly, I was about the age of the main character of the movie when I saw it. And the idea that playing these video games in the arcade was like a sword in the stone kind of test, and that if you were good enough that you would get picked to join the Star League and all that. That was awesome. I love the story of The Last Starfighter, but I mean, come on, the visual effects were cheesy even back then. I mean, if you compare the visual effects of The Last Starfighter to Star Trek II or Blade Runner, or even, Return of the Jedi, or any of those movies that came out before it, the visual effects in Starfighter were not that impressive. And Luke is saying, because they are deluded too. I'm not, again, without context, I'm not sure what you're saying there. Mr. Captain says, how would you respond to someone who asks why God doesn't talk or show himself like he did in biblical times? Also, anyone who sees God is now seen as crazy. Well, first of all, I don't think that anyone who sees God is crazy, because like I said, I see God in the world all the time. In fact, the Bible supports that you will know God by his works, that you will see that the stars proclaim his existence, right? That you can see God in everything. That being said, I do, one thing that, and this is another, going back to what Corey was saying, where when he was talking about, did you fill out the job application because God didn't give me a job, right? Well, people say, well, God doesn't talk to me. And he says, have you listened? And do you know how to listen? Do you know how to be still? Or if you're sitting there by yourself, do you have to turn on the TV? Do you have to turn on the radio? Do you have to be listening to some music? Do you have to be, constantly stimulating yourself? Because you're never going to hear God while you're watching Dukes of Hazzard or whatever, right? You're not going to hear God while you're watching Star Trek. You're going to hear God when you are focused and communing with God. And very few people do that. Very few people do that. And you're not going to hear God in the way that, people like to say, it's not like the frickin' Simpsons where God's going to show, hey, Ned, how you doing? It's not that. But you can feel it. You can know it. And the problem is that, yes, people are seen as crazy, but that's just our modern conventions trying to say that, oh, that's all just a bunch of mumbo jumbo. It's just supernatural garbage. It's not real. Now, if somebody starts walking up to you and say, and I've had people do this, where say, oh, well, God told me to invent this crazy healing machine, and all you got to do is stick your leg in it, and it'll fix it. I actually had a guy tell me this a couple of weeks ago. All right, sure, dude. I think that there are crazy people, and that those crazy people, particularly people who suffer from forms of schizophrenia and such, might confuse their mental disease with hearing God. And so that becomes a problem as well. But, same thing, those same people that with their various disorders can think that their delusions are other things, like the classic, they think they're Napoleon, or maybe they think that they're not the gender they were born. And for some reason, when it happens to be gender, we're willing to accept that delusion as reality, but we patently reject God. I'm old enough to remember when scientists said there were only two genders. Yeah, well, you know what? The next generation will not be. That's the scary thing. I mean, that is just truly disturbing to me. Luke says, I am not suggesting you are delusional because you see God. I'm doubting the existence of God because I'm aware of delusions, and I know that facts help identify them. Okay. But there's no fact that, okay, so for example, I see the, God's work in this image, right? You see light refracting. Both are correct. Now, how do the facts of it being light refracting through the clouds and all that disprove my delusion that I see God's handiwork in it? Why is Miles blue and I am not? I don't know. Because he's feeling blue, I guess. Gary Johnson, yes, Alexander. Gary Johnson is who I voted for. Thank you. I couldn't remember. Problem is, with God, we cannot fact check, hence the annoyance. Well, I understand that, Luke, but you know what? You can't fact check philosophy. And God is a philosopher. And just like you can't, you cannot fact check atheism either. You cannot prove nor disprove the existence of God, period. It is a matter of belief, period. And and that's why the debate will never end, right? Until all of one side just are gone. Which, don't worry, Luke, you'll win eventually. At least temporarily. I truly believe that. I think that eventually there will be no believers on earth. And I think that is actually in the Bible. Schromer says, it is truly sick. It's illegal to seek psychological help if you have same-sex attraction and don't want to be, but it's legal to let young children undergo sex change procedures. Yep, that's the world we live in. And by the way, interesting fact that Corey was talking about at church yesterday is that, we talk about how, the religion is becoming less and less an influence on people. The fastest growing religious sect in the United States and around the world is atheism. And please spare me the arguments if you're an atheist that atheism is not a religion. I get that, but the fastest theological position, if you will, is growing is atheism. So while that is growing, and we're becoming more satanic in our beliefs. And when I say that, again, I'm not suggesting that people are worshiping the devil. That's not what satanic means. For those of you that don't understand what satanic simply means the worship of self. If you read the Satanic Bible, the very first thing it says is, do what you will. The philosophy of Satanism is to do whatever feels good to you as long as you're not harming another person, which, by the way, is the general philosophy of the world today. Do whatever you want to do as long as you don't hurt somebody else. And it's okay. Do whatever feels good. Follow your heart. Do what you want to do. Make your life happy. Live your life to the fullest. However you want to phrase it. That's the satanic methodology. And that's what we're becoming. We're becoming more and more satanic. We're focusing in on ourself, on self-pleasure, on self-satisfaction. And that becomes what we basically crave out of life and try to get out of life. And what are the results of that? Well, according to Time magazine, between 2009 and 2017, depression and suicide for young people is doubled. Yeah, seems like it's working. And Eduardo just subscribed, probably to the Anti-Tracker channel, but if you're here, Eduardo, welcome. Sorry, just making some more coffee. All right, Mr. Captain says, this is like early days, the other channel with the chat size and subs and the same people. I tell you, I do like that, Mr. Captain, and it'll probably, on this channel, it'll probably stay that way, which I'm perfectly fine with. Piano Dean says, I think it would be funny if your son made an animation of Jesus ascending into heaven and someone trying to ride up with him by holding his foot and Jesus shakes him off. Actually, I've talked, Joshua is very leery about doing animations with Jesus. Like, there was one that I really wanted to do, and I understand why he didn't, but I think it would have been funny, is to have, like, what if the Westboro Baptist Church was correct? All right. What if their theology was actually correct? And then do a little flashback to, you see Jesus doing the Sermon on the Mount, and he's like, and remember, bless these people and bless these people and bless these people, and then have someone raise their hand. Yes. Well, what if they're gay? And then have them say, well, bleep them. So because basically, God hates gays, and then have Jesus go on a tirade about how much he hates gays, because that is so out of character for Jesus. It's ridiculous. Thomas says God is in Trek 5. Bird just live watched it yesterday. Yeah, that's not God. The guy with the leg fixing machine wasn't crazy. He was a con man. Well, maybe so, but I'm still not. I wasn't about to go along with that one. In fact, I told him that if he, because he was sitting there talking about how he had this miracle machine that could heal not just my leg but any injury and all that. And I said, oh, you know what you should do? Go get that machine, show it to our pastor so that we can start, getting everybody that's sick and hurting in the church fixed. And then he started talking about how the CIA was after him and stuff. And I was like, okay, dude. Mr. Captain says, if a 16-year-old you saw you now, what would he say? Would he be pleased with your life? What advice would you give 16-year-old anti-trekker? Wow. First of all, 16-year-old me looking at me would say, oh my God, I become fat. And what's with the messed up teeth and the hair's all, yeah, I would be all over all that crap. But as far as advice that I would give to 16-year-old me, invest in Apple computers, and let's see, also get involved with YouTube when it first gets started. Learn how to do video editing and stuff before YouTube comes out, and become PewDiePie before PewDiePie happens. And let's see, Fractal says, what do you think about the preferential treatment Jacob gave Joseph, even though Isaac was guilty of it too, and about Jacob lying to his father in order to become the patriarch? That's actually an interesting part of it. I don't think that was Jacob's shining moment, to be sure. And I think that's what led to his wrestling with God. But the thing about the Bible is it doesn't just show you the good stuff, it shows you the bad stuff that happened along the way. Do you think that the big old long number gender crap will ever just die? No, I think that that's here to stay. I think that people are going to be constantly coming up with new stupid gender terms forever and ever and ever. And if you dare try to speak against it, that you are somehow a hateful person and you just want to oppress people, blah, 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 blah. I don't think that's going anywhere. It's always struck me as curious that non-believers frequently shout the name of a non-existent being when things go wrong. Never hear someone shout Winnie the Pooh. Well, that's kind of true, but I think that it's instinctual. That when things are bad, we tend to reach out to a higher power in hopes that higher power will hear us and help us. And so I don't fault them for that. When Christ returns, how will you know it's him and not Satan in disguise or just some nutcase claiming to be God? It's a very good question. Don't know. But I think that the best way to understand... Well, actually, I do know. And again, I hate using Corey so much. He's a great pastor, but and I don't worship Corey, but he tells really good stories, and this is one of them. He actually has a friend who works for the Secret Service. Now, the Secret Service, most people know, protects the President of the United States, but the Secret Service is also responsible for counterfeit currency. Their job is to investigate and bust up people that circulate counterfeit currency. And Corey went to his office and visited him. And in his office, he had a stack of $100 bills. And he handed them to Corey and said, check those out. And Corey's looking at him and goes, and Corey's like, wow, these are awesome. Why you got all this money sitting here? He goes, oh, it's all fake. And Corey's like, well, wait a minute. How do you, this looks perfect. This feels perfect. How do you know this is fake? He says, because we, at the Secret Service, we study currency. They study everything about it. They study every detail of it. And because they know currency so well, it's really easy for them to spot a fake. That's how you will know. People that are close to God should be able to spot a counterfeit. Luke says, I don't know about you when you were an atheist, but I do think of religion as irrational and just a bunch of superstition. It's just based on a spiritual method of thinking. I did think of it as irrational. I did think of it as superstition. And I also, one thing that turned me away from religion is the obvious hypocrisy of it all. Did I vote for George McClellan? No. I don't know who that is, actually. However, I do think that both atheist and religious thinking have common anthropological origin. That's interesting. Don't know why you would say that, but I will say that's interesting. And that alert was just that the church is going live. And Chrono says, "Hey, Satan." Yeah, I don't think that's quite what you're supposed to be saying. Darren says, so are you one of those folks who blames the baby boom generation for a lot of the problems in the U.S. these days? Oh, McClellan ran against Lincoln. Ah, funny, Thomas. Gotcha. No, I don't blame the baby boom generation for a lot of the problems in the U.S. these days. Yes, they caused plenty of problems, but so did we, and so did everybody else. The problem is that we need to stop pointing the finger at who's at fault and just start trying to deal with the problems. Honestly, I'm sick of the blame game. I don't give a crap if it's the baby boomers, if it's the Gen Xers, or if it's the millennials or whatever. Stop pointing the finger and saying how it's the other guy's fault, and just let's come up with ways to deal with issues. The problem with satanic thinking is that it keeps the rights part of life, but it drops the duties part. So that's what led civilizations to decadence and collapse. Oh, you mean like how the United States and Europe are heading? Yeah, I agree. And the problem is that the opposite of satanic thinking is, of course, Christian thinking, which you would also reject. Before the Big Bang, what was God doing? How did he just exist? Where did he come from? I know, major philosophical questions, just looking for your take. Well, Mr. Captain, I've said this a couple of times before, and one of these days I am going to do a video. In fact, Mr. Miles, if you would help me put together a video on this, I would appreciate it, because I'm going to put it on this channel, and anytime anybody asks, I'm going to refer them to it. But here is the short Reader's Digest version of my take on things. God, and people say, oh, who created God? Well, God was created approximately 2,000 years ago. He was created in the womb of a young maiden that we in the modern English refer to as Mary. I don't know what her actual Hebrew name was. And she gave birth to the Christ, who we in the modern English call Jesus, whose name was actually somewhat like Yeshua. Anyway, this young man grew up and was eventually executed for his beliefs, and at which point he ascended. Now, at that point, he becomes a celestial, if you will, being. He leaves the concept of a corporeal form of space and time. He leaves that behind him. He is now outside and beyond what we would call the space-time continuum. As such, he now existed in the past, present, and future simultaneously. And because he pre-existed, basically because he was around, he caused the Big Bang at that point, which would be, 14 billion years ago or whatever. And then, of course, impregnated Mary. And so God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit are not three separate entities. They're the same entity at three different stages of its life, if you will. That's my personal take. I'm not suggesting that that is, in fact, a theological fact. It is a minor issue, meaning that it is not a salvation-based issue. That's just the way that I look at it. And I know that's a very disjointed way of putting it, but I don't want to spend an hour and a half talking about it. Resolute says, if Westboro is correct, I'd gladly go to hell. You and me both, my friend. Stromer says, I had a conversation with an actual Satanist once. He did give me really good advice. If you cheat someone buying cheap and selling high, you will never be satisfied. If you cheat someone buying cheap and selling high, you will never be satisfied with your life. Okay. Okay. Can the sleet is falling here. Can you please shovel my driveway? Sure, Kronos. Just get me a ticket out there, and yeah, with my one good leg, I'll do my best, but it might take me until spring. Tell your 16-year-old don't climb poles for Comcast. That would probably be good advice, yes. If you invest in Apple, you won't need YouTube. Well, that's true, too. Mr. Miles says, my advice to my younger self would be buy shares in Google when it's a brand new search engine. Well, that's why I say Apple, because Apple rose before Google. What if God is from a religion that has not risen yet? Well, as far as every detail of God, nobody knows, right? I don't think that Christianity has a 100% picture of what God truly is and all that. I think that it is the most comprehensive view of God that there is. But I don't think that, God is beyond human level comprehension. So you couldn't possibly contain everything, even in a 66 volume like the Bible. I have a free energy, perpetual energy machine I designed, and it works, but I'm a procrastinator, so I'll get to it later. I have a clip I may use in a video someday of Homer Simpson saying, I'm not a praying man, but if you're up there, please save me, Superman. Yeah. That sounds like a Homer Simpson prayer, right? Cold Fusion Waffle says, to be fair, I think all of us at 16 were kind of dicks. I know I was. That's probably true, yes. The book of Revelation and also some of the Gospels give us the info we need to distinguish the true Messiah from the false ones. I believe you're right, Aberjam, but I also believe that you have to, if you are not full of the Spirit, then it would be very easy to be fooled. How would you settle these two seemingly contradictory theological concepts? One, God is omnipresent. Two, hell is a state of separation from God and a lack of God's presence. It's actually very simple. First of all, that's not what it says, but what hell is referred to, particularly in the book of Revelation, is the second death. Personally, now this is again not what we call a major issue. Your salvation is not dependent on your agreeing with me or disagreeing with me on this particular topic. However, hell is, first of all, the term hell simply means afterlife. So, but what we in modern day refer to as hell, we think of as the condemned. What happens to the people who do not get into heaven, which is actually also incorrect, but that's okay. But the new earth, what happens to the people that don't get to go to the new earth? Well, that's actually quite simple. If you read Revelation, they are destroyed. And Revelation is, by the way, not the only place where that's hinted at. There is actually, I can't remember which one of the epistles it's in, but it says, not to fear those that can only harm your body, fear the one that can destroy your spirit, meaning fear God. So hell to me is not a physical place, if that makes any kind of sense. And just a second here, guys. I'll be right back, but I think Mrs. Anti-Trigger has something she needs to tell me, so I'll be right back. Give me just a second. Okay, sorry about that. All right. Kronos says, I'm hearing sleet on the window. That stuff sucks. Oh, I'm sorry, Kronos, but I'm still jealous. Anyway, Fractal, I hope that answered your question as far as... So, obviously, if you are destroyed, if you are gone, if you are truly facing oblivion, you are, in fact, separated from God. And God is still everywhere. I can't wait for the coming war between the attack helicopters and Osprey genders. Okay. Kronos says, I pray to God through Jesus Christ. Good, that's how you should do it. So God is a predestination paradox. In a sense, yes. That's my take on it, Jeff, but I'm not saying that that is 100%. So the new Earth is Miriam's planet. Things didn't work out so well there. I hope not. Darth Maul says, all hail the Queen of Turdistan. Yes, she basically was saying, basically reminding me that it's breakfast time, and actually it's past breakfast time, and that I should be wrapping it up so that we can get some breakfast. Stromer says, the Satanist told me, buy cheap and devalue your own mind when you get it. It will be tainted by your lack of respect. When you sell it at value, you respect the other person. Well, that's an interesting way to look at it, but basically, like I said, the Satanist philosophy is as long as you're not harming another, do what you will, do what you want. Theoretically, if an atheist believes in ghosts, they are holding contradictory beliefs. How can there be an afterlife beings without an afterlife? That you would have to ask an atheist. I know that there are some atheists, like even Dr. Alex, who unfortunately is not here at the moment, but he said last week during this stream that he was an atheist, but he was a spiritual person. Now, I see that as a contradiction. So how and we didn't get a chance to really get into that particular statement, because I don't see how you could believe in the spiritual with and be an atheist. But maybe there is, and I just don't know it. I disagree. His father and son are the same entity. He has three different stages of its life. God has always been all. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Right, but here's the thing, Aberjam, is that and I understand what you're saying, but if something is removed from time and space, if past, present, and future all become irrelevant, and by the way, there is scriptural support for that. The time as we know it is not the same for God. Then the moment that even if Jesus was conceived 2,000 years ago, as soon as he left the time-space continuum, he existed for all time. He existed yesterday, today, and tomorrow, and has never changed because they're all the same to him. He who has seen me has seen the Father being Yahweh. Hebrew, I am, I shall always be. Yes. Breakfast in the evening sounds strange. Well, that's because it's not evening here. Piano Dean says, have you ever seen the South Park episode with John Edward? It's so funny. I'm trying to remember that one off the top. I've seen pretty much every episode of South Park, but I'm not sure which one that is specifically. It comes down to human thinking on what causes stuff to happen. When primitive humans saw an object doing weird stuff, they attributed it to an invisible power doing the action. Well, and not sure what your point is, because quite frankly, yes. If you see, for example, when I drop this and it always falls, I say, ooh, there's an invisible thing doing that, and that's true. It's called gravity. Do you get jealous of other peeps? Well, everybody gets jealous. I'm not sure if there's some specific context to that. Christians believe in ghosts even though they're told not to. Some do, yes. I do not, but some do. From there are two different approaches. The materialistic approach is to think the object itself bears an invisible power doing the action. It led to magic, alchemy, science. Okay. Christ is God putting his finger on the pool of space-time. Kind of, yeah. What would you think Jesus done in the missing years? If you're talking about like when he was growing up, I don't know. There's no indication of what he did or didn't do, so I'm not going to speculate on that. Cuba Fidel says, I'm obviously ahead of you. Okay. I'll you a Jedi now? Fractal says, I'm an atheist who's a spiritual person. I don't believe in spirits, but there's an attainable spiritual sense of awe that anyone can sense, especially with psychedelics. Well, then that's not being a spiritual person. I'm sorry. You're basically trying to appropriate the term spiritual to mean something that it is not. And no offense, Fractal. I mean, I have no problem with you. But if you want to say, ooh, taking LSD makes you have spiritual, feelings and all that, no. Then number one, you're demeaning true spiritualism, and number two, you're assigning it something that it is not. The spiritualistic approach is to think there's an invisible being bearing the power to do the action on the object. It led to animism, polytheism, and monotheism. All right, so Luke, you're saying that you believe in magic then? Did you do a mic drop? No, that was actually a remote control drop. Mr. Miles says, spirituality is for those thinking, understanding, where religion is for those seeking reward or comfort. It's founded in fear of death. Disagree with you on that, wholeheartedly. Because, first of all, spirituality and religion are kind of intertwined. You cannot have one without the other. Religion is simply how you exercise your spirituality. And so some people don't have, you can be spiritual without a religion where you believe that there's something out there, but you don't have any focus on it. You don't have any rituals around it or anything. You just kind of, yeah, there's something out there, kind of like your typical agnostic type thing. But just if being an atheist and seeking understanding is not spirituality, because the atheist part is the rejection of spirituality. Will God become an amphibian and mate with Kate Mulgrew and Gary? That's horrible. How did Jesus ascend out of space-time? I don't know the actual mechanism for it. I don't know. Because I'm not God. Fractal Machine said, well, I've had a spiritual experiences that I related to God while I was growing up religious, and on LSD you get the exact same feeling but amplified by a huge factor. That's fine if it can simulate the same feelings. That doesn't. Here's the thing, and this is something that a lot of people argue about. Like, oh, spirituality is nothing. You can recreate the same feelings in the brain by injecting this chemical or doing this kind of stimuli or whatever. Yeah, that's true. And you know what? You can also, with LSD, have optical stimulation as well, where you see things that aren't there. That doesn't mean it's the same thing as seeing something that is there. All right? Just because you can simulate the feeling doesn't make it the same. If that makes sense to you, Fractal. Mr. Miles says, you caught up? Congrats. Thank you. Yes, I'm going to be wrapping it up here in just a minute because Mrs. Antchecker is waiting for you. You should go eat. Making your beautiful wife wait is not in your best interest. You are right, Trek 95. That's why I am going to wrap it up in just a second. My point was that God has no stages of life because he's outside of the space-time continuum, regardless of whether or not he entered it. Well, but you see, if he was created within it, then he did have a stage of life. And that's all I'm saying, Aberjam. And, and like I said, it's completely hypothetical, and that's just my overly analytical mind trying to come up with an answer, because that's a question that I always had as an atheist. Well, if God created everything, where did God come from? And I was trying to think of an actual, is there a possible explanation for that? And that's my fan theory, if you will, of the origin of God. Chrono says, yeah, coffee is not a thing. Well, coffee is a thing. I have some right here. I consider myself partly spiritual as well, mostly due to traditional martial arts training, but there's nothing religious about it. Many atheists meditate. Okay, well, meditation can relax you regardless of if you believe in the spiritual or not. How were people saved before Jesus died? Primarily through the sacrificial system, at least according to the Bible. The Jews that's where the whole concept of a scapegoat came from. And, I'm not an expert on all that. Prior to that, good question. Don't know. I don't know what the answer is. Like if you say, well, what about a person that lived, prior to the establishment of the Jewish faith? I don't know. Your explanation of the origin of God doesn't really make sense. He exists because he was born into a world that he created. Well, here's the thing, Jeff. And I'm going to finish with this. So please, I'm not going to keep reading comments because I do need to wrap it up. But you're saying that it doesn't make sense, yet you would probably completely be on board with it if it was presented in an episode of Star Trek. The idea that you have a timeline, and then in this timeline, God creates a being, but this God exists outside of the timeline, but he creates him at a specific point in the timeline. When that God then exits, because you're outside of the timeline, you exist past, present, and future. That's just the nature of being outside of time. Now, it may not make sense to you. I don't know why. But to me, it makes perfect sense. Because if you could exit time space, like right now, if you could somehow exit time space, you could see the whole of history simultaneously. It would be an experience that very few people could really deal with. It's very, very few people could comprehend the experience of that. But, in fact, probably no human being could truly understand what they were seeing. But you could experience all of time space simultaneously and from the outside. Piero Dean, how can I find the Discord channel? You can actually, if you go to any of my anti-tracker videos, it's in the description. The link to my Discord is in every single anti-tracker video. So, and I understand that it's not, it would be easy if the Bible simply said, here's where God came from, but it doesn't. And so I'm just trying to come up with something that is logically consistent. And while it does kind of create a predestination paradox, it's still logically consistent. God created God, but then God left the timeline, or the time space continuum. Therefore, he pre-existed himself because of the nature of being outside of time and where he could create God. Gary says, are you streaming tonight? I may, depending on how much work I get done today. So anyway, so I'm going to wrap it up there. Thank you all for hanging out with me. And I really, really appreciate it. These streams are always a lot of fun, but I do have to cut it off or else Mrs. Antricker will get downright mad at me, and that's, don't want that to happen. And Mr. Miles, yes, I skipped you. Yes, because you're a jerk. No, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to, but I told you I wasn't going to read any more comments, but you guys kept putting comments in. But I'll read this one just because you're whining about it. Mr. Miles says, there's also an issue with, for an atheist, a soul is still sort of exists, but it's in the mind, the consciousness. This is just as spiritual to an atheist as the soul of a believer. Well, except that, here's the thing, and you correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Miles, as far as you may disagree with this, but most atheists will say there is no such thing as a soul. It is not an actual thing. Consciousness is simply an emergent property of the brain. That consciousness is nothing special. It simply exists because the brain exists. And that when the brain is gone, consciousness ends. Right? So therefore, when you die, you no longer exist, period. And so if you want to argue that there is a soul, well, then you're arguing for the supernatural. And if you're arguing for the supernatural, then you ought not be an atheist. At the very least, you should convert to being an agnostic. And no, Richie Poole, Miss Anterior does sometimes wear pants, but, I live by the philosophy, happy wife, happy life. And if you don't live by that philosophy, then you are doomed. Assuming you're a male and you're married. And Jeff says, well, that leads to the point that something existed to allow God to ascend and create himself in the universe. No. Then you're not understanding the nature of being outside of time and space. God has always existed because he exists outside of time and space. Anything that could exist outside of time and space has always existed and always will exist because it's outside of time and space. And if something is able to ascend beyond time and space, which we cannot, there's nothing in the Bible that says that we will somehow become, beings that exist outside of time and space after the judgment. We will live on the new earth. We were not going to be where, in an external form like God. And so we will never understand that. We will never experience that. We will always be linear beings. Anyway, I know you guys keep coming up with some great stuff, and I would love to talk about this all day, but then I do need to have breakfast with the wife. So I love you, my friend, but I say respectfully, go away. Yes. And that was my best imitation of the Critical Drinker. If you haven't seen him, he's a fun channel. And something has to be outside of time and space to allow God to ascend into. Yes, God. So, yes, it's a circular thing, but that's basically how it works. Anyway, guys, take care. Have a good one. And remember to, hopefully, if things go well, I'll do a stream tonight on the Anti-Trekker channel. If not, then I will talk to as many of you as possible tomorrow night. And don't forget to vote, I guess.
You son of a bitch, anti-tracker!